Dr. C. Raj Kumar. He is a Rhodes Scholar and the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University in India. He was appointed as the Vice Chancellor at the age of 34 in 2009 when the university was established. Professor Kumar has academic qualifications from the University of Oxford, Harvard University, University of Hong Kong, University of Delhi, and Loyola College. Professor Kumar conceived the idea of establishing India's first global university and with the visionary leadership and philanthropic support of Mr. Naveen Jindal, established Jindal Global University in Sonipat, Haryana in 2009. Jindal Global University is one of the only 20 universities in India and the only non-STEM and non-medicine university which has been declared as an institution of eminence by the Government of India. Professor Kumar is an accomplished legal scholar and works in the field of human rights and development, comparative constitutional law, terrorism and national security, corruption and governance, law and disaster management, legal education and higher education. He has over 200 publications to his credit and has published widely in Australia, India, Hong Kong, UK and USA. I warmly welcome and invite Professor Raj Kumar ji to address us.
Thank you very much, Shilpa. First of all, I would like to extend my heartiest congratulations and indeed deep appreciation to the SJaipalReddy Memorial Foundation and Mr. Arvind Reddy for inviting me to this very solemn occasion where we are doing several things, but also paying rich tribute to the life and contribution of one of India's tall leaders, truly remarkable statesman, a politician with a deep sense of commitment and dedication to nation building, and somebody who lived his life with the highest degree of integrity and rectitude and deep sense of conviction. So I want to pay that tribute as I begin some of my reflections. We are also, of course, celebrating democracy, but also recognizing the International Day of Democracy and also 70th year of Indian independence. I'm also truly delighted to see Honorable Mr. Justice Chelameswar, former Judge Supreme Court of India, another extraordinary jurist whose contribution both in the court and outside the court gave a lot of inspiration for all of us in the efforts to build a society based on the rule of law. I'm also grateful to see Sriram Karri for his absolutely thought-provoking and truly remarkable. So I just want to say that this topic and theme that we're discussing today about the future of democracy is a timely one. Let me begin by saying, referring you to a very important contemporary report published by the Economist magazine, and this is they published this as an annual effort, and they also produced what is known as the Democracy Index 2021. Although most of what I'm going to speak will be in relation to India, this report published by Economist talks about, and I quote, according to this measure of democracy, and I'm going to quickly cite this, but before I do that, their democracy index is based upon 5 categories. One is electoral process and pluralism. Number 2, functioning of government. Number 3, political participation. Number 4, political culture. And number 5, civil liberty. So this is the methodology they adopt, and they've been doing this since 2006. And the 2021 Democracy Index has been published recently. And in that report, they say, and I quote, according to our measure of democracy, less than half of the world's population now live in a democracy of some sort. A significant decline from even 2020. Even fewer reside in a full democracy. That's around 6.4%. This level is down from 8.4% in 2020 after 2 countries, Chile and Spain, were downgraded to flawed democracies. Substantially more than a third of the world's population, over 37%, live under authoritarian rule, with a larger share being in China. Now, in the 2021 Democracy Index, 74 of the 167 countries and territories covered by the model, or say 44.3% of the total, are considered to be democracies. Now, the number of full democracies fell to 21 in 2021, down from 23 in 2000. The number of flawed democracies increased by 1 to 53. Of the remaining 93 countries in this index, 59 or quote unquote authoritarian regimes, up from 57 in 2020, and 34 are classified as hybrid regimes, down from 35 in 2020. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the report, but that's kind of a big picture situation with regard to the state of democracies around the world. With that prefix, I want to say that was truly remarkable that in 1947, the founding individuals of the Indian Republic set out the creation of a newly independent nation on with a view to or a vision to build a liberal, democratic, secular polity and country. Now there were several predictions at that time that absolutely got it wrong. People were predicting the imminent fall of Indian democracy. They were arguing that this was too big, too diverse, too complex, too diverse, and too much of religion and caste and all of that, including poverty, which will lead to its imminent fall. And of course, all of them were wrong. And now, since that time, we've had a lot of evolution in the country, and we'll quickly run through it. But one thing is certain, that in 75 years, India has truly emerged as a federalist, pluralist, liberal, and democratic nation that has been built on robust foundations with regard to protecting the constitutional order, as well as an efforts to establish a society based on the rule of law, all of which I believe are under stress. Now, let me quickly make the first argument that the constitution that the founders had created pretty much laid the foundations of the Indian Republic. The post-independent story in India is one of social transformation, political enlightenment, economic prosperity, civic empowerment, and even cultural awakening. This is India. This is indeed the idea of India that constantly inspires us to do more, in many ways investing in human progress, conscious growth, and inclusive development. Now, at the heart of this lies the Constitution of India, where rights and duties and the rules of governance are enshrined. And despite significant challenges that the constitutionalism efforts to implement constitutionalism in India has been the case, India did, withstand the test of time to become a role model of democracy and grew from strength to strength, especially when you look around, even in this region, the stress and the downfall of other democracies is the telling tale. Now, the constitution became the supreme law of the country in 1950, a watershed moment in India's history. This is a significant milestone as the Constitution of India replaced the Government of India Act in 1935 as the governing document of India on 26 January 1950. Now, this is also a very profound development because it underscores the founding vision of our democracy and the attachment that was given to the principles of the rule of law and values of constitutionalism. This, of course, becomes even more important because of the fact that at that time, India was filled with large number of illiterate people. The decision to adopt the universal adult franchise at a time even when countries in Europe, such as Switzerland, ended up giving right to vote for women only in the late 60s and early 70s, India decided to do that just at our independence. And that was an extraordinary commitment towards the idea of democracy. Now, I do believe that constitutions at their best may provide the political and institutional venue for promoting a right discourse. They are also written at a time when momentous political changes take place in a country and the framers simply objectively attempt to transform the society. And that's exactly what the framers of the Indian Constitution did. Now, constitutional guarantees cannot ensure human rights are protected unless they succeed in engaging the democratic process in society, an empowering function that ought to become the goal of constitutionalism. So it is important that there are independent democratic institutions that function effectively in ensuring that the governance system adheres to the principles of the rule of law and the constitution. I do believe that constitutionalism should be understood to encompass all such institutions. It is a principle that encompasses a variety of political theory ideals, demonstrating a framework of governance that is based upon human rights, fundamental freedoms, and human dignity. Now, constitutionalization of human rights creates a theoretical framework for the protection, and from it flow the various legal, judicial, democratic, and institutional mechanisms that ensure it. The judiciary is able to best perform its constitutional functions only when the independence of other democratic institutions is guaranteed and the government adheres to certain principles of constitutional governance. Human rights and fundamental freedoms are too important for the judiciary to be their exclusive guardian, and most liberal constitutions do not envision that. Let me move to the next big idea in 1947 and how we have grown, which is about the need for having a pragmatic relationship with our neighbors, but also having a foreign policy with a scientific bent of mind. Our foreign policy was always rooted in realism and pragmatism, and this particularly helped India navigate the often complex international relations aptly during the Cold War era and protected it from being another theater of superpower competition that devastated many nations either by civil strife and dictatorships, military or civilian, or by both. Today, as we have entered the third decade of the 20th century, another superpower competition is looming large, but India has now become an influential power on the global stage alone and hence cannot be ignored. By the end of the decade, India is projected to be the world's third economy from the fifth position it is now. India's democratic ethos were accompanied by a scientific bent of mind that helped the country invest heavily in agriculture, heavy industry, science and technology, R&D, and all of which have reaped the benefits. Today, we are indeed a frontline nation in agriculture, science, technology, and innovation. In fact, recently I was talking to a bunch of students in the United States, and I did tell them that the cost of the India's leadership in promoting frugal innovation in science and technology is extraordinary. The contribution of Indian scientists, even before the independence, people like Homi Bhabha and Vikram Sarabhai, and later Dr. Abdul Kalam, and of course C.V. Raman, all these individuals had the vision to elevate Indian science and benchmark it with the world's best. And today we have culminated in a situation where India's successful Mars mission, the cost of which was much less than the cost of the Hollywood movie Gravity. Such is the power of Indian science and technology and its contribution towards benchmarking excellence for the world. So the 75 years of Indian democracy that we celebrate today witnessed the country's great strides in legal and policy mechanisms to attain different types of achievement, including development. It also promoted meaningful social security programs to assure the dignity of life, defined excellence in science and technology, and also made steady progress in healthcare, education, entertainment, sports, heavy industries, and so much more. At the dawn of independence, India had 20 universities, and today we have over 1,000 universities. Our ability to make a difference in promoting education and contributing to the development of nation has been quite significant. The democratic decentralization process in the form of establishing Panchayati Raj institutions and Nagarpalikas have also made deeper democratic decision making possible, and economic liberalization has also lifted millions of Indians out of poverty. The life expectancy at the time of Indian independence was around 37, and now it's nearly double that at over 70 years of age. These are significant achievements that Indian democracy has seen in the last 75 years. Now, what are the challenges that we face today? While we look back at our founding and the journey we have traveled in these 75 years, it is important for us to acknowledge the significant challenges that we are facing today as a society. Among all the challenges that we are facing today, I believe the most important of these challenges in our society is our relative indifference to ensure our commitment to the values of constitutionalism and the rule of law. I'm not saying this because I'm a law professor or somebody trained in law. I genuinely believe that the significant challenge that India will continue to face in the future is our efforts to build a society based on the rule of law and our deeper civil society's conscious commitment to protecting the values of constitutionalism. Let me take you back to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly, who was deeply appreciative of the challenge and warned against these threats in his last speech delivered at the Constituent Assembly on November 25th, 1949, a day before the Constitution of India was adopted. And he famously gave 3 warnings. Let me begin by quoting him. If we wish to maintain democracy, not merely in form, but also in fact, what must we do? The first thing, in my judgment, we must do is to hold fast to constitutional methods of achieving our social and economic objectives. It means we must abandon the bloody methods of revolution. It means that we must abandon the method of civil disobedience, non-cooperation, and satyagraha. When there are no way left for constitutional methods for achieving economic and social objectives, there was a great deal of justification for unconstitutional methods. But where constitutional methods are open, there can be no justification for these unconstitutional methods. These methods are nothing but the grammar of anarchy, and the sooner they are abandoned, the better for us. Unquote. The second thing he observed that we must do is to recognize the need for maintenance of democracy, namely not to lay their liberties at the feet of even a great man or to trust him with power which enabled him to subvert the institutions. This is John Stuart Mill's famous warning. There is nothing wrong in being grateful to great men who have rendered lifelong services to the country, but there are limits to gratitude as well. He was conscious about the potential threats of hero worship and how no democracy can accept any form of hero worship. The third thing that he argued is that we must do is to not to content with mere political democracy. He exhorted us to think about social democracy and political democracy. He believed cannot last unless there lies at the base of the social democracy. So these his 3 warnings: the need to avoid hero worship, need to give up the grammar of anarchy, and need to work towards a social and not just a political democracy. These are unfinished tasks that are before us, and we need to work towards it. Let me quickly summarize some of the current threats to democracy. First, the dysfunctioning of democratic institutions. There are several curbs on free press, the occasional challenges that are imposed in the functioning of the parliament itself, the politicization of the civil services, and even arguably the politicization of criminal justice system, all of which are unfortunately affecting the independence of institutions. Second, and I'll deal with a little bit elaborately, corruption and inefficiency. Rampant corruption, red tapeism, delays in delivery of justice are also weakening the foundations of democracy. Anti-social elements. You may recall that over 3 decades ago, there was an important report known as the VORA committee report that talks about criminalization of politics and politicization of crime. Some of those elements are continuing to challenge us even today, and we need to address that. And part of it is about how we can improve the functioning of the criminal justice system and instill faith among ordinary people that the rule of law will prevail. 4, growing economic and social inequalities among people. Poverty, healthcare, issues surrounding literacy, population, unemployment are prevalent and hampering national progress. If there is one thing that we all witnessed during the COVID-19 crisis was the vulnerability and risk associated with impoverishment that adversely and disproportionately affects the poor, and no democracy can sustain if we have significant levels of inequalities and iniquities deeply embedded in both the civic and political culture of a nation. 5, issues surrounding discrimination. A lot has happened since our independence, but we have a long way to go. Caste, gender, and religious discrimination continues to prevail in Indian society, slackening its advancement and development. Exploitation of caste and religious minorities for narrow political gains has unfortunately affected the concept of democracy. 6, influence of money and muscle in elections. While we have been able to instill faith in the idea of democracy, and while we've been able to conduct free and fair elections to a large extent, I do believe the use of money and muscle power during elections reflect the challenge of Indian democracy as a whole, and it continues to impact the electoral process itself. I want to briefly refer to the relationship between corruption and how it has acquired a greater threat to Indian democracy. Let me begin by the famous observation of Navi Pillai, former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And when nobody, this particular, set of words, in many ways defines the challenge of corruption and its impact on human rights and democracy. And this is our quote: "Let us be clear, corruption kills. The money stolen through corruption every year is enough to feed the world's hungry 80 times over. Nearly a billion plus," and she says 870 million people go to bed hungry every night. Corruption denies them their right to food and in some cases their right to life. In human rights terms, it denies access to justice for victims, it exacerbates inequality, weakens governance and institutions, erodes public trust, fuels impunity, and undermines the rule of law, in particular, the right to a fair trial, the right to due process, and the victim's right to effective redress, unquote. I have elsewhere written a lot about it, but all I would say here is that corruption as a facet of a country's impact on human rights is serious, and we need to address that as well. So in conclusion, I would like to say that despite the many challenges our polity faces, we have reasons to be optimistic because as a nation, India has proved its skeptics wrong many times. Democracy does allow for course corrections. I would like to conclude by saying the challenges to the rule of law and democracy in India today are multifold, and there is no single quick fix to overcome these challenges. The change needs to begin from the top if we are to emerge as a more democratic nation which abides by the rule of law. The formal mechanisms for the protection of rights through constitutional apparatus and their enforcement by the judiciary can fail, particularly when these institutions operate under limitations. More importantly, there is a need for people's resistance and movements to ensure the protection and promotion of rights. While a sound constitutional framework, an independent judiciary, and other democratic institutions can uphold the Constitution of India, the principles of constitutionalism have not yet permeated our political culture. It is here that we have a long way to go in ensuring the human rights, justice, and constitutional empowerment become the sine qua non of democratic governance in India. There is no better way to end than citing the words of none other than the father of nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And I quote, "I will give you a talisman. Whenever you are in doubt or when the self becomes too much with you, apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest whom you have seen and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him or her. Will he or she gain anything by it? Will it restore him or her to a control over his or her own life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to Swaraj for the hungry and spiritually starving millions? Then you'll find your doubts and yourself melt away," unquote. I would like to end by thanking Mr. Arvind Reddy and the Jaipal Reddy Foundation for giving me this opportunity to share these reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for bringing Dr. Ambedkar, where he said, "There's nothing wrong in being grateful to great leaders who have rendered lifelong services to the country, but there are limits to gratitude." And he quotes Irish patriot Daniel O'Connell, "No man can be grateful at the cost of his honor. No woman can be grateful at the cost of her chastity, and no nation can be grateful at the cost of its liberty." Dr. Ambedkar emphasized that this caution is far more necessary in the case of India than in the case of any other country. And as you took us back to the founding vision of democracy, we see nationalism is often said to be the crucible of modern democracy. Social awakening, inclusive development being the key. Thanks for informing us about the report by Economist magazine, Democracy Index 2021, which focused on electoral functioning, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. Statistics show that we have authoritarian regimes around the world. You brought in the fact and the need of the day that democratic institutions need to function effectively and independently. As we develop in science and technology as a nation and set new benchmarks, we also need to look whether these are accessible, affordable, and available to all the sections. That's vulnerability inequalities. Thereby, our efforts to build a society with protecting the values of constitutionalism.